Hi guys, I wasn't going to make a video this week, but I had a couple requests for it, and so I decided to. I wanted to start with this announcement. Exciting news! Josie had her full, finally had her full. I feel like you guys were on this trip with me, especially the last few months when I was so nervous she was going to have it early. So without further ado, I want to introduce to you Katniss. Josie had a solid black filly, so no white on her. She's just as perfect as can be. And the winner of the guessing contest was Kendall Hickman. Congratulations! You won the contest. She was born at about 8:40 on Friday night, and so you guessed, I think, at about noon that morning, and so you were the closest. I think you had said Colt, but time-wise, you won. So I might include some pictures as the rest of this time doing distance learning continues of my new sweet filly Katniss. All right, back now we got to switch gears to not some fun stuff and look at the civil rights movement, which was pretty horrific in a lot of ways. And I put some pretty awful pictures into this Google Slides. I hope that was okay for you guys. Usually I share these in the classroom, and I think that they're very important. They're all very real. It's not like we're making this stuff up or it's Hollywood. But I do feel a little bad having you guys navigate that kind of on your own. So let's start with this image right here. I'm going to give you some images, and this one here, as you looked at them, hopefully, or if, as you do, take a look at them closely. Like, for example, in this one, you can see the segregation leads all the way to the water fountains used. So blacks and whites were not able to use the same water fountain. And I want to remind you guys that with Plessy versus Ferguson, the separate but equal clause was created, and that was in 1896. And now we're into the 1940s, 50s, 60s, etc. And you can see the governments of these southern states can't even get water fountains equal. How are they going to get things equal like schools, housing, and other things like that? There's just no way. So I like this image. I like to start with this image. And then, of course, we get more graphic as we go. This image is horrible. Hopefully you guys took a look at it. I hope that you started and listened to this song. I know I've got some kids in band. They might enjoy it a little more, but the words of the song are just really telling about what's happening and what's going on. It's pretty incredible to imagine, I think, this horror that is happening. Now, the lynching movement had been going on for many, many, many decades since the Civil War. It wasn't like it was a new thing, but again, this is a tool that Southerners used to, quote unquote, keep the blacks in line and to put fear and terror into them so that they would, quote unquote, behave. Okay. So I did include some of the lyrics right here, so hopefully you can just read through those. It's an amazing song. I recommend listening to the words. All right, now this is Emmett Till. Emmett Till is such an important figure in the civil rights movement, and I like talking about him because he is just a little bit younger than you. So please watch that video there. I think that's a very important thing. You can see in this photograph of him what he looked like before the attack and then what he looked like after. And I don't want to just move on without saying what a hero his mother was, because his mother chose to have an open casket of her son looking like this. Most of us would not want a dead loved one to be shown in this manner, but she knew she had to do it because she wanted the world to see what had happened to her son. And, you know, the men who did this, they got off. They did not serve jail time. Just in the last couple decades, the woman who made the claim against Emmett Till said that he did not actually do that. So all of this was in vain. So please watch that video clip. One other thing about Emmett Till is the kids who were his age and saw this happen to him about 10 years later or so, they are going to be at the forefront of the civil rights movement. They're going to be leading the sit-ins at the lunch counters and doing all that kinds of stuff. So this is important not just in the moment, but for the whole generation moving forward. Too fast. Okay, so this is kind of an overview. I wasn't sure when you guys would look at these notes. Obviously, I would much rather do this in the classroom with you, but there are a lot of events along the way, and I want you guys to realize that this is called a civil rights movement. None of this happened by chance. These people were extremely smart in how they were doing this. They were methodical in choosing who would be on the front line, with the exception of like Emmett Till. That was by happen chance, right? But you know, the kids that desegregated the schools with the Little Rock Nine, they were chosen. The young adults who sat at the lunch counters, they were chosen. And then they also got training so that they could sit through the abuse that was inflicted upon them without reacting. And that's what we call nonviolent resistance. And of course, Martin Luther King, who's right here paused in this image, was the leader of that. He was the leader of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, or SCLC. And then there was another group called SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. So he was not a part of that, but they did work together very frequently. So Martin Luther King Jr. was SCLC. So please watch this. I think it's a good little video overview for you guys. All right, and then this man right here is Thurgood Marshall, not as well known, of course, as Martin Luther King Jr., but he's, you know, he's really, really important, and he is arguing the case to overturn school segregation, and that, of course, is Brown versus Board of Education. So that this ends discrimination or segregation of schools, and it also nullifies the separate but equal clause, which had been established by Plessy versus Ferguson. Those of you guys going into AP government last year, this is very important when you have a case that sets precedent and then another case that changes that precedent. So that's what Brown versus Board of Education does. And then following that, we're going to see the Little Rock Nine and see other schools desegregated. I've heard many historians say they actually kind of messed this all up. The kids that were entering the schools, the African-American kids, did suffer abuse, you know, and bullying, like what we would say today. And a lot of historians and people looking back on it think they should have desegregated the teachers first, and then the students. One little note about the Little Rock Nine. I do. Okay, cool. Sorry, it's very hard to click. Little Rock Nine, which is up here in the right-hand corner. These are high school kids who are going to go and desegregate Central High. And please notice that there is military with them. The 101st Airborne was deployed by President Eisenhower to support them and to protect them. And one of these children, the 9 children that survived this, went on to become an author. She wrote a book called Warriors Don't Cry. It's a very easy to read children's book. But in it, she talks about how that helped a lot, except in PE class. When they were in the locker rooms, obviously the men could not go in there and protect them. And so that was kind of the worst of it. So I want to remind you the 3 branches of government, they all have the ability to play some role in the civil rights movement. Obviously, the president can support it or not support it. So Eisenhower didn't come out full-heartedly in support of civil rights. But when the Supreme Court acted, he did uphold the law. This would be different than like Lyndon Baines Johnson, who was active in the civil rights movement and the legislation and pushing it forward. So Eisenhower's more of a backseat, but he did, of course, do his presidential duties to, at least a minimum, to follow the law, enforce the law. Legislative branch enacted the Civil Rights Act, in 1964. They're going to follow that with Voting Rights Act in 65. And that's important. But again, Lyndon Johnson was a big part of that, as was Martin Luther King and other advocates. And then the judicial branch upholding affirmative action. This was a big deal when I was going to college in the 90s. They tried to end affirmative action here in California with Prop 209. So, you know, these things are not ever kind of ending. They kind of cycle back and forth and around as we go. All right, let's see. Okay, the last one I want to do on this little video is topic 810, and you're not going to get a ton, unfortunately, about Malcolm X, but I want to just expose you to him. There's a little bit in your book. Usually I have kids read excerpts from an interview he gave actually to Playboy magazine, of all things, but it was an interview. And he wrote gave a very famous speech called The Ballot or the Bullet. And anyway, so just one thing, a lot of kids get this confused with the Black Panthers, which was kind of a militant group based out of Oakland. They did carry weapons and things like that. And it was kind of interesting because a lot of people will advocate for Second Amendment rights, but when the Black Panther started to come around, then they wanted to have limits on who could own guns. So kind of interesting history that unfortunately we can't get into in this kind of format that we're learning in, but you certainly can Google it and look at it on your own. But Malcolm X was one way to remember that he's a black Muslim is that he did take the X as his last name, because he considered the name that he was given to be the name of, his slaveholding past. And so he did take the letter X as kind of a take back. But he did use more confrontation. He did advocate for, more like in your face type things versus Martin Luther King was nonviolent resistance. Him and Martin Luther King did sometimes come together and agree, but most times, that while they wanted the same result, they disagreed on how they were going to get there. So let's go ahead and just stop there. I'm going to make a new video on the second, the last little part of this week's lesson. Okay, thanks guys. Congratulations again, Kendall.